Britini D'Angelo. Britini D'Angelo, 27, is a kindergarten special education teacher, a content creator, fifth-degree black belt, and six-time world champion in the Chuck Norris System Karate, and previous house guest on Big Brother Season 23 on CBS, where she was juror number 1 and cast a vote for the winner of the season. During the historic Season 23 finale of Big Brother, host Julie Chen Moonves gave Britini the floor. She revealed to her fellow house guests and to America that she has autism. By doing this, her goal was to bring about increased acceptance to the autism community and ultimately to stop multiple stigmas associated with autism that are prevalent in society. Since the show's conclusion, Britini has raised over $25,000 for organizations both in her town and outside, as well as being featured in multiple articles and podcasts such as Forbes, Black Belt Magazine, etc., where she has continued to promote her message of advocating for those with autism. Britini D'Angelo. Britini D'Angelo, âgée de 27 ans, est enseignante en éducation spécialisée en maternelle, créatrice de contenu, ceinture noire 5e degré et 6 fois championne du monde dans le système de karaté Chuck Norris. Elle a également été participante de la 23e saison de Big Brother sur CBS, où elle a fait partie du jury en tant que jury numéro 1 et a voté pour le gagnant de la saison. Lors de la finale historique de la saison 23, l'animatrice Julie Chen Moonves lui a donné la parole et Britini a relevé à ses colocataires ainsi qu'à l'Amérique qu'elle est autiste. En partageant cette information, son objectif était de promouvoir plus de grande acceptation de la communauté autiste et de lutter contre les nombreux stigmas associés à l'autisme. Depuis la fin de l'émission, Britini a collecté plus de 25 000 pour des organisations locales et nationales et a été mise en avant dans plusieurs articles et podcasts, Forbes, Black Belt Magazine, etc., où elle continue de promouvoir son message de soutien aux droits des personnes autistes.
Hello, Britini. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
I have heard a lot about you, and thank you so much for being part of our awesome conference.
Oh my goodness. I feel so honored to be here. So truly, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so I think most people would have been aware of you from your time on Big Brother.
Yes.
Could you explain to us what Big Brother's all about? And I will, as I said to you just before we started, I haven't seen an episode. So you're going to tell me a lot of things I don't know.
Okay. My first question that I would tell you is how much time do we have? I'm kidding. No, so Big Brother it's a giant social experiment. So it's been 26 seasons of the show, and there's been some like celebrity Big Brothers and some reindeer games in there too. But it's been going on for years, and it's a social experiment where 16 random strangers go into a house and they basically compete, and every week someone goes home. It is basically the general premise. So somebody will win what's called the head of household competition. They get their own room upstairs. They get to nominate 2 people for eviction. And then there's also a second comp that happens at a minimum called the veto, where one of those 2 people that were nominated for eviction on my season, I was up there a lot. I was the pawn. So I was like the person that would sit next to the person who everybody else wanted to go home, but I would just kind of be the seat filler. And you would play in a veto. If you win the veto, you're safe. You can take yourself off the block. The head of household has to re-nominate somebody else in your seat. So if we're both on the block and you win the veto, then you can use it on yourself, and now you're safe for the week. The head of household has to nominate somebody in your place. And then at the end of every week, somebody goes home and the house votes on who goes home. So we keep playing every week. Sometimes there's double evictions where 2 people go home in a night, or there's triple evictions that have happened. But there are also specialty competitions that happen that can potentially save people depending on the theme of the season. But that is essentially the preface of the show, is that every week somebody goes home, people win power, people go home. And I made it as juror number 1 on my season, so I got to vote for the winner of the show, which is pretty cool. Got to put my key in, turn it. It was pretty cool.
Do the viewers get like instruction books to explain what you just said?
So a lot of times, so the show airs 3 times a week. Thursdays
Okay.
is live, and then Sunday and either Tuesday or Wednesday. I know the schedule's switched up a little bit recently, but for us, it was Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's pretty much very self-explanatory in the episodes. It's a lot to explain at a preface, just because it is a social experiment. There's so many things that go into it, so many different aspects of the game. But yes, it is explained very thoroughly by the host of the show, who's Julie Chen Moonves. She explains everything very nicely for the viewers. So if you're even a new viewer of the show and you don't know anything of what I just said, you could easily learn what I just said.
So you did say a phrase I don't think I understood at all, and that's reindeer games. Did I get that
Yes,
right?
so that was a brand new spinoff that they just did this like around holiday time, where it was literally like I forget how many days it was, but it was a very short run season. Nobody like lived in the house, but like they played games, and the winner of that show won $100,000. So it was like a very shortened version. It was only like 2 or 3 weeks. The normal Big Brother season is like 85 to 100 days.
Okay.
So talking extremely condensed version of the show. And it was like so much fun. 2 people from my season were hosts of the show. They were the elves. And then the winner of my season, Xavier, was actually a contestant on that reindeer games. So it was fun watching him again, and everybody else too.
Okay, so you said somebody's voted on every week.
Yes.
Is that every episode or every week?
No, every week. So there's, like I said, so there's 3 episodes. The Sunday episode covers the aftermath of the eviction, the head of household competition, kind of who that person's thinking of nominating, and then ends with the nominations. So it ends with the 2 people who they've nominated to go up on the block. Wednesday or Tuesday episode kind of goes through how those nominees are going to kind of fight back, the veto competition, and then the veto meeting. Is that veto used to save somebody? If not, how does that play out, and who is left on the block for Thursday's eviction night? So they separated into these like 3 perfect segues, and then Thursday is the eviction.
Okay.
So Thursday is like the last social conversations that have happened. Has any decision changed from the house guest? And then the eviction itself.
Okay. And during this week, you're being filmed constantly.
24/7. 24/7.
So there's a purient interest in me. It's like, is it everywhere, or are there some parts of the house which the cameras don't go?
So the cameras are everywhere. They're also like so cameras are everywhere in the house due to safety reasons. So obviously some parts aren't shown, but there has to be cameras in there for literally just safety precautions if anything were to happen to you in that specific place. But no, I mean, there's like 100+ cameras in that house, 90 to 100+ cameras. They're everywhere. And I actually, when I was living in the house, I noticed them for like the first 2 days, and then I really didn't notice them anymore unless they would like go, "Ah," and they would like face you. And then then you knew that production was watching you have a conversation. And like, that was the only point that I would like know, but I really just forgot. I mean, that really just became my house. And like, I just lived there, and I lived my everyday life and found a routine that worked for me and that kind of thing. So it was a crazy experience, but no, the cameras are literally everywhere.
And did that make you more self-aware?
In some aspects, yes. But also I really have to thank production for this. They worked really well with me on accommodating me throughout the show, in terms of like, I obviously had talked to them about the fact that I was diagnosed with autism at 22 months, and that a huge part of how I understand the world is through subvocalization. So if I don't hear it out loud, I don't get it. So like when I would go in the DR is the only place where like nobody else in the house can hear you except for production. And I would like self-vocalize for the first 10 minutes of being in there, just so that I could like talk to myself without people thinking that was weird. Because if I were to sit in a room and just start spitballing stuff, they'd be like, "Oh, Brittany, you having a conversation with myself?" It did happen a couple of times, and I would be like, "Yes." And like, I would just own it, because if I was talking to myself, it was probably a good conversation. I don't know. But I would have those sub-vocalization moments in the diary room, so that it was more private for myself, and I could start to connect the dots in my head. And they would just kind of let me sit there and do that. And they would just kind of give me the time to decompress my brain and just kind of process everything in a space that was my own, and then go into whatever questions or things that they needed me to do in the DR.
So the DR is the diary room, which I
Yes, the DR
presume
is the diary room, which is where you can comment without anybody else hearing you.
It's
That's where
such a-
like during the competitions they'll like throw it to somebody and they'll be like, oh, so like in this competition you have to do this and this and this, and this is how I felt during this competition, and this was my strategy, and yada yada yada. So we basically have to explain the competition, the rules, every aspect, how we're feeling. Do we want this veto? Do you not want to win the competition? Are you going for the HOH? That kind of thing. So they really get a lot of like the thought process behind what's happening in the house.
Okay. Okay. I want to ask you about your disclosure, but I need to that's going to be a little parenthesis for a second. So you made the production team aware that you're autistic.
Yes, I did. On the at the very jump of casting. That's not what I'm saying. This. Throughout the entire casting process, my autism diagnosis was something that I was never going to hide. I had talked about it pretty publicly since I was 16. And even throughout college, I was very open about it. And I just knew that going on Big Brother, I definitely wanted it to be something that production and America knew, but something that my house guests did not know. And I made that a point. And I was like, look, there's always that segment on finale night where you mention your secrets. And that's what I'm going to tell the house guests. And I knew that from the second that I started my very first casting video to the casting team. But no, production knew from the get-go that I was autistic, for sure.
Okay, so what did they do for you? What were the accommodations that they could give you?
So in retrospect, it wasn't, I mean, so vocalizing the DR was a very big part of what they could do for me. In terms of everything else, I mean, I have gathered so many strategies in my 27 years of living, or at that point I was 24, but I had gathered so many strategies in 24 years that I really was, I mean, I was as ready as I could have been. I mean, obviously there were so many other aspects that like you just can't predict in the Big Brother house, but I really had the strategies, and I learned as I was in the house more strategies of how I was going to deal with things. I mean, production was so incredibly supportive, but I do feel like the accommodations, aside from the diary room accommodations, really had to come from me because it is a social experiment. So like for me, the emotions ran very high in the Big Brother house. And the way that I found out that I could get over my emotions quicker was by crying. So I am known for being a crier on my season, and that's okay because I was very in touch with my emotions, but I realized that crying about something for 5 minutes could get me over that emotion in 10. So instead of like perseverating over that or ruminating over that for like 15, 20, an hour, 2 hours, I could cry about it for 5 minutes and get over it and rejoin the house and rejoin conversation in a quicker modality. So that is what I chose to do instead of ruminate or perseverate or fixate on something. So it just came with trial and error, to be honest with you. In terms of, I mean, but really they could not have been more supportive of me and who Britini was in that house. And I mean, they were always checking in on me, always making sure. I mean, they did this for every house guest too. Let me not just say that. They did this for everybody, not just me, but they really cared about our well-being, and they really wanted us to succeed to the best of our ability in that house. And that was awesome. Like that was very reassuring to me. And I felt like that gave me just a heightened more, like a more heightened sense of confidence in that house that I could achieve what I wanted to do. For sure.
For me, I struggle with social communication. And so on a day-to-day basis, I can get through it. Going to parties, I have to plan, and then I have some downtime. Did you just like lock yourself in your bedroom for 2 weeks after the show?
You know, it's funny because social conversations for me are sometimes still an issue, and it really just depends on the situation. I found that for myself in the Big Brother house as well. I remember very much so there was an interaction that I did not have with somebody until after we were both evicted and both in the jury house. And I explained to this individual, I was like, look, I couldn't have this conversation with you in the house because A, I found no point in it. B, it gave me too much anxiety. And C, I knew that even having the conversation with you, it wasn't really going to get me anywhere. And it was with somebody who I was kind of aligned with, but I wasn't really aligned with in the house. And I just knew that like that social interaction was going to give me more anxiety than proving something to me.
Yeah.
So I shied away from it. And so there were so many times in the house where I would have to be like, okay, Britini, like you don't want to talk to them and you're done. Like your social battery is off. And like that would happen to me so often. Like people knew that like when I had my pajamas and my towel on my shoulder, the game talk is over. Like I'm going to bed, I'm doing my routine, and I'm off for the night. And people would stay up until 5 a.m. and talk game. I would have to go to bed at like midnight, latest 1 o'clock, or else I would not be recharged enough to do the next day. You know what I mean? So like I definitely noticed that. Like I was, I believe, the earliest, or if not the second earliest person to go to bed on a season the entire time, because I just needed that. I needed that rest. I needed that, like, I'm done for the day and I can just relax and just be Britini. After the show, I'll be honest, I really just embraced family and friends. And that kind of gave me like a new auxiliary. Embracing family and friends when you come home that you haven't seen in so long and that you haven't talked to, especially my parents. Just because I've never gone a day without talking to them. And then you go as many days as I did without talking to them. You got to catch up. And so I really embrace family. And that was kind of how I like re-exhilarated my social battery in terms of energy wise. But yeah, it was definitely a trial and error in terms of like sometimes I would have to force myself to have those conversations when I was just like, I have no more words left and I have no time to plan this. And I don't want to have this conversation with you, but my fate's in your hands. So I guess I have to. And here we are.
You don't have a chance to like practice your conversations or, you know, all
No,
that stuff.
that happened very rarely in the house. Would I have a like, like I said, there's literally times in my life where like I have to practice conversations because, like I said, social situations are literally sometimes a situation, is how I always like to say it. But in that house, you get very, very little time to do that. So it really was just like a trusting my gut and hoping that the words that were going to come out of my mouth were exactly what I meant. And that I could just portray it in the most honest way possible. And I felt like just telling myself, be as honest as possible and let that lead the conversation did me well. And I really think that the conversations that I had in any tough situation for me came out very authentically because I don't know how to be anything else. I just don't know how to lie, and
Yeah.
I can only be one way. Like, I'm only going to tell you how it is. But it really helped me to communicate the most effectively that I could in that high pressure situation. So
I have done pretty magical things in my life, but I admire you getting through 3 days of that, let alone like,
thank you.
how many weeks were you there in the house?
I was there for 6 weeks in the house, and then in the jury house, I was there for 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's like, well done. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Because as I was preparing for this, I was just thinking, boy, there's just my special talent is being able to sit in front of 100,000 people and improvise a piece of piano music. That doesn't worry me one little
Oh,
bit.
that's amazing.
But that
Wow.
being in that situation for more than
Yeah.
3 days, and that's fantastic. You said in an early interview, your biggest fear about the show was losing communication with your family. How did you
For sure.
handle that?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I'll be very honest with you. My mother and father are like my two best friends. And there's not a day where I have gone where I haven't talked to either one of them. So knowing that Big Brother would completely cut me off communication wise for the both of them, it was really hard because like they're the two people that, like, if my perception of something is off, which I can't control in some circumstances, they're the ones that lead me on the right path of like, hey, this is what you missed. I had nobody to do that for me in the Big Brother house until I met my best friend on the show, Azza, who Azza ended up becoming that person for me. And I thank God every day that Azza was on that show with me, because Azza will be in my wedding party. I'm very single, but like whenever I find somebody, she will be in my wedding party, as will some of the other castmates that I had on that season. But she is truly so incredible. And like, I feel like that was how I dealt with it, was because the show gave me Azza and Derek, who we were the jokers on the show, the three of us. And they gave me two incredible human beings that I could trust with my whole heart and just confide in with everything that I needed to. And just like in a game where you can't trust people, I could trust them 100%. And that is carried over into real life. The two of them are two of my best friends in the world, and I talk to them almost every day. So like, it really, like, our season was different though. Like, our entire cast still talks, and anyone that has gone on the show previously will tell you that Big Brother 23 is the closest cast of anybody, because we truly, like, we all walked in that house, we sat down at the dinner table, and we were like, wow, this is different. Like, this is not just any typical season. And it's going to be something that is so incredible. And obviously our season was so historic for so many different reasons. But it truly, like, I feel like that was how I got through it, was because I had people who I could confide in, who I could talk to in that way. But obviously, I mean, I miss my mother and father dearly. I mean, I wouldn't be me without them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how
Yeah.
hard they fought for me, and how, I mean, my mother knew something was wrong when people would walk, when I, at 1 year old, she knew that, like, as people would open the door, I wouldn't turn around, or I was nonverbal. And I mean, I was diagnosed at 22 months with nonverbal, repetitive sims, no social cues, and no eye contact. Like, that was, I mean, that was where I was at 22 months old. And that's how I was diagnosed so early. But it was because of my mom pushing for that. Like, I would not be Britini without them, and without their constant love and support, and without their constant advocacy for me, who they've shown me how to be my own advocate in the same realm, you know? So just, it was hard for sure. I mean, that's an understatement, but
Yeah.
I mean, we did it, and I was really impressed with myself that I could. Because going into it, that was literally my biggest fear. And that's no shortcoming of that statement of mine, is they've always been there. So how do you go 3.5 months without them?
I mean, especially your support network. So
Yes.
losing that connection, I mean, especially for an autistic person, is pretty devastating.
Oh, it was, I mean, you think of losing a rock, like, they are my rock, and you lose that rock, and now you're on gravel, right? Now you're on gravel. You could slide, you could, I mean, you could slide, you could slip, you could do a whole plethora of different things, right? But at that point, I just kind of had to trust that I had the strategies in place to get through it in the most effective way possible. And I think we did a pretty good job. I'm
Cool.
sure there's things that I could have worked on, but I'm going to say I did a pretty good job.
And actually, I was going to ask you about that. So the one of the big, maybe the surprises for me, and that's, please don't take this as a judgment, but just when I was reading some of the notes for this, you decided not to disclose until the finale to the castmates, yet you told the production staff. Was that the correct thing to do?
I stand by that decision 100%. I did not want to tell my castmates that I was autistic, because I wanted them to get to know Britini as Britini. And I didn't want them to be like, oh, she's having a meltdown because she's autistic, or, oh, give her a minute because she's autistic. Or, I don't know what the preconceived notions of any of the 16 people in my house would have been about somebody with autism. And, like, the whole thing is, my whole cast was extremely supportive. So I probably could have said something and nothing really would have changed. But how would I have known that going into that social experiment? Like, how would I have known that? I mean, there are people, and I know you know this. We have a lot of work to do in this community, and there's a lot of awareness. There's a lot of acceptance to be had in this community. So I stand by my decision 100% to not say anything, because I wanted to play the game as Britini, and I did not want anything hindering the view of the house guest in the process of doing that.
Okay, and that's fair enough.
Production knowing was a different thing, because production could help me with accommodations. We could talk through different things of how would this be in the house. And I felt like it was essential for them to know, because obviously that's the way my brain works. So being 100% fully transparent with them makes 100% sense to me. But with the house guests, no, I wanted to be Britini, and I wanted to play the game, same playing field, no holds bar. Like, let's do this thing, you know? With nothing standing in my way that could have.
Yeah, you're raising a good point. I think in a utopian world, disclosing is completely fine, because no one's going to judge. And I can see it could go, one way or the other.
I mean, you just don't know what people, you don't know what people do know or don't know, especially in a social experiment where you're meeting strangers, So like I said, it was essential for production to know, because we were able to talk through things, especially before going on the show, right? We were able to talk through so many things, and just, like, make sure that I was good on all fronts. And I felt like that communication was essential, but especially with the house guests. No, I standing up there on finale night and telling them all on that stage, and just being able to tell everyone together, it felt like, I felt so vindicated in that moment, because even with my platform currently, I am an autism advocate, and I love, using my experience to educate people and just kind of put my experiences with autism in layman's terms and just really make it something that everybody can understand and not this foreign concept. So I feel so blessed. I really do. And I mean, they accepted me with open arms and they still have, and it means the world for sure.
Was anybody surprised?
Yes, I think that some people's reactions in that video, I just posted it. The 3-year anniversary of our finale was yesterday. And I literally, I remember watching the video, people's jaws hit the floor. Because, and I don't know what reaction I was expecting. I'll be honest with you. I just I share my story and I share my truth in my heart. And I don't expect anything with that because it's my truth. I don't need to expect anything from you. I want it for me.
Yeah.
And no, but people were shocked. Yes, for sure.
When I disclosed, I was diagnosed quite late in life. And when I disclosed, especially to my school friends who now live in a different country and haven't seen for 30 years, I said, well, yeah, I've been diagnosed with autism. And they went, yeah. I think they all knew. That was, that for me, that was, in fact, for me, it was I hardly got a single reaction. And that was, in one respect, interesting, but two, it was also, why didn't you say something? Why couldn't my friends have been a bit more of a stronger ally 20, 30 years ago to say, hey, look, everyone knows you're quirky and things, but we think there may be something deeper going on about that. Anyway, I'm happy for you that you got that reaction. And I also know we often have no expectation in that sense. We're not too sure what's going to go on. Yeah.
No, like I said, I was sharing that on finale night for me. And I was sharing that because I mean, in terms of a TV perspective, right? We don't see much representation on TV for us at all. And I was just so honored that I got to be that representation, or at least a glimpse of what it could look like. And every single day I was in that house, I knew, and I felt so honored to be a part of that story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it really just, for so many reasons, that night meant the world to me. Really.
Britini, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. This was so enjoyable. Really. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let me stop the recording. I'll tell you the secrets now.